So far in my player preview episodes, I have covered the 10 players that I most expect to make up the rotation for the Kings for the majority of the season. And so those 10 guys are De'Aaron Fox, Keegan Murray, DeMar DeRozan, Domantas Sabonis, Malik Monk, Kevin Huerter, Trey Lyles, Alex Len, Keon Ellis, and Jordan McLaughlin. The one wild card is Devin Carter because he's injured coming in, so we don't know what we're going to get from him when and if he comes back mid-season. So he's the one wild card. But then the rest of the guys on the roster, I don't really expect to make big contributions. But that being said, I think there will still be guys that absolutely get opportunities. And I think every season there is always one or more guys that kind of, from that pool of players that you don't expect before the season, make their way into the rotation. And now the extent of how much they're in their rotation definitely varies from like a Keon Ellis last season, who was definitely in this group of players, obviously becoming like a starting level player. But then other times it'll just be a player that will contribute because someone else is injured. And so will play for a few weeks of the season in the rotation. And so in this episode, I'm going to be covering 3 players, and those players are Jalen McDaniels, Orlando Robinson, and Colby Jones. And then in a future episode, I'll cover the rest of the guys from the two-way guys, plus the guys that are going to be on the Kings for training camp, trying to earn a roster spot. And then I'll make a separate video for Devin Carter, probably last. I think so far in these player previews, I've been, hyping guys up. I've been talking super positively, like these guys are going to absolutely make an impact. They're going to be great. They're going to fit in well to the rotation. But these 3 guys that I'm talking about now, you kind of have to dig a little deeper to try to find those positives and try to find those ways that they could possibly make an impact on this team. Because, once you get past that top 10 of the Kings roster, it's not the prettiest. Jalen McDaniels was awful last season. Colby Jones can't shoot the 3, was not good in summer league. Orlando Robinson, maybe there's something there, but there's also a reason that the Miami Heat were okay moving on from him. But I think some, if not all of these guys at different points of the season will get their shot. And if they take advantage, then they may be able to carve themselves out some role on this team. Before we get into talking about these players individually, as always, if you enjoy this content, make sure to like, comment, subscribe. As always, shout out to Cody Willis and Joe Mama for supporting the channel and being members. Members get early access to these types of videos among some other perks. So if you want to really support the channel, you can become a member. And so let's get into the rest of this video. I'm going to start with Jalen McDaniels because I think on the surface, Jalen McDaniels is the exact type of player the Kings need, just from like an archetype perspective. He's 6'9", he's long, he has that defensive ability, he's only 26 years old, and he has quite a bit of NBA experience. He's played 248 games in his career. He's started 45 games in his career somehow. Started his career in Charlotte before going to Philadelphia. And when he went to Philadelphia, I thought that was a good pickup for the Sixers. I'm like, they might have found something here. And then it turns out they really didn't. And they moved on from him. So he went to Toronto. And he had what was probably his worst season last season in Toronto. I mean, especially from a three-point shooting perspective, he just could not hit the 3 at all. 17% from 3 on 1.4 attempts per game. But he really hadn't been that bad in his entire career. He ranged from 32% when he was at his highest volume in terms of three-point shooting to 40% when he was at his lowest volume. That probably does mean something. When you're at your highest volume and you're not shooting it well, I mean, that says something about the player, that they're just not that great of a shooter, right? I mean, the one encouraging sign about his shot to me is his free throw percentage. He's had seasons where he's shot in the mid 80s from the free throw line, and I think that's always a good sign when it comes to a player's shot and whether it's real or not. But then there have also been seasons where he shot in the low 70s. And with a player like him, it's always not a lot of volume. And so I don't think you can read too much into just straight up percentages. And so when you just look at him play, you look at how his shot is, you look at how other teams are defending him, everything points to him not being a very good shooter. And that's obviously his biggest struggle because he can defend, but he's not, an elite level defender that can make up for him not being able to shoot the ball. There's just really been no point for me since we've traded for him where I've thought that he's going to really play any role on this Kings team. I think when you just look at his pure numbers throughout his career, they look a little better than I think he actually is. I mean, he's had opportunity early in his career on just bad Charlotte teams to be able to put up some numbers and play a lot of games and play minutes. But I think the hope is, yeah, I don't think he's that great of a player, but I don't think he's as bad of a player as he showed last year in Toronto. And I think with a better team around him and in a very limited role where he only needs to shoot those stationary catch and shoot threes, and he's able to run the floor and use his athleticism with passers around him, I think he can be better. And I would expect him to get opportunity this season because of just the Kings' lack of wing depth. Like if Keegan Murray goes down, if he gets injured, there's just no one to replace Keegan, and this team is going to be in a really bad spot because Keegan is the only guy that can defend on the wing. But that's why this is a great opportunity for Jalen McDaniels, because despite how poorly he played last season, he is getting another opportunity in what I think is probably the best possible environment for him to be in, just because of the Kings' lack of wing depth. There was a report earlier from Sean Cunningham that said Jay Crowder was in Sacramento working out here, and he's an older wing that's well past his prime. If he got signed to the Kings, that just reminds me of like Trevor Ariza coming to the Kings and what was a very bad experience for everyone. But honestly, I don't know who I would rather have. Would I rather have a very old Jay Crowder or a younger Jalen McDaniels? Jay Crowder obviously more proven, but also more proven lately that he's extremely washed. And Jalen McDaniels, maybe he's like young enough that he still has his best basketball in front of him. If you just like squint hard enough, maybe you can see Jalen McDaniels actually providing something positive to this team. But I do think that is quite a stretch. And I think when you just look at the Kings rotation, it's just better to have a Kevin Huerter playing at the 3 instead of a Jalen McDaniels, just because your offense is going to be so much better. But we know that there are going to come some times where these wing players are just going to be dominating a game against us. We're going to get blown out like we did against the Pelicans last year. And we're just going to say, just throw somebody out there, throw a body out there to just try to defend. And so that's probably going to be the same coming into this season. And so hopefully somebody can step up, and maybe it is Jalen McDaniels because he has the best physical attributes to be able to fill that role on this team. Another guy that has kind of a chance to fill that role on this team is Colby Jones. Not quite the same physically, but he's a big player. I don't know, 6'5", 6'6". He's listed differently in different places. But like I said earlier, he had a really bad summer league. He had like maybe 2 good games. That one game especially where he's hitting a bunch of off the dribble shots. And, off the dribble shots is not exactly what I expect Colby to be doing if he got any minutes for the Kings. And so that's not super important, but I think if, when you're hitting those off the dribble shots, it's telling you something about a guy's shot. And so there's some good signs there, but when he shoots the ball, there are some really bad misses. And that's not a good sign at all. It just doesn't seem like he's really progressing in his 3-point shot, because I think for the most part everything else is there in his game. He's a playmaker defensively. He can get steals, he can get blocks, he can make things happen on the defensive end of the floor. He can rebound the ball. But again, for a guy like that, it comes down to the 3-point shot, And in the G League last season, I think in like the regular season, he shot like 37.5% or something like that. And then in the showcase, he shot in the 20%. So even that out, it's like low 30s for him in terms of 3-point percentage. And in the NBA, he shot horribly from three. And it doesn't really seem like that's improved. Everything else about his game in the G League was great. He could score, he could get to the rim. He was playmaking, again, rebounding. Like, he could put up these massive stat lines. He could put up these triple doubles. But how can that translate to the NBA? Because he's not going to have the freedom to be able to just miss threes, but then stay on the court. And it's the one thing that I just hate the most about basketball and the way basketball is. And today's basketball, even though it makes sense, so much of these guys that are role players and supposed to be 3-and-D players, it really is about the three for so many of these guys, and it's as simple as that. And it's not really about evaluating other parts of a guy's game as much as just can he shoot the three. There is more to it than that, but those other things just really don't matter if he's not able to hit the three, him and Jalen McDaniels. But those other like little things that Colby Jones do could be what earn him more minutes if he can just hit the three at a respectable rate. He doesn't need to be a great 3-point shooter. That's the thing. That's why the little things that he does matter, but he just needs to be able to get to like 36% from three, just average. I think for these two guys, if they can't succeed on the Kings, I'm really not sure where else they would really succeed. I mean, maybe on a team that has 4 shooters around them, but I think with the Kings, it's like you're in an offense that's going to reward movement and cutting to the basket and the hustle plays that they can provide in the roles that they are in as those like 5th option 3-and-D players. And so this is the best opportunity for a guy like Colby Jones. And it is only his 2nd season. And so there is more opportunity beyond this season for him. But if we don't at least see some stretches for him when he does get opportunity on the court where he can actually knock down the three, then it's going to be really hard to see any way that Colby's going to be a rotational player in the NBA going forward. The guy that I'm most intrigued about, though, is Orlando Robinson, because this is a 24-year-old 7-footer that has not been given that much opportunity yet at the NBA level in Miami. But he's the most interesting to me because of his size, because of the shot blocking that he can possibly bring to this team, but also because of how dominant he's been at the G League level. And not just at the G League level, but also in Summer League 2 seasons ago. But this last season in the G League is 23 points per game on 57% from the field. He attempted 1.5 threes per game in 11 games played and shot almost 39% on those. His free throw shooting wasn't good at 58%, so a little worrying there. But 12 rebounds per game, 2.5 blocks, 1.5 steals. I mean, this is just a guy with all the physical tools to really be a monster defensively and a monster on the glass, which, I mean, is just the role that really Alex Len plays for the Kings. And so I think that's why Orlando Robinson is so intriguing, is because we've seen Alex Len thrive in this role as a similar player. I think Alex Len is a better decision maker with the ball, and that's something we would need to see from Orlando Robinson. But a guy that we can kind of compare to is Neemias Queta, who was also super dominant in the G League. He's earned his way onto the Celtics roster. I don't think Nemi was quite the same offensive force inside that Orlando Robinson has been in the G League, but I do think Queta was a better passer. But I think the one thing that's really gonna separate Orlando Robinson is if he can hit that three, then that's really what could earn him some minutes, especially over a guy like Alex Len. We've seen Alex Len attempt some threes, and I feel like inside Alex Len, there's a good shooter in there somewhere if you really got the opportunity. But I think it was just a little too late in his career when he was developing that, and the Kings weren't in a position where we were like, yeah, just start chucking a bunch of threes and and see if that's, something that we can use. But if Orlando Robinson can come out and start hitting threes along with what he can do defensively and the presence that he can be at the rim on both ends, then he absolutely has a chance to be a rotational player for the Kings. I think then the worries would be about maybe foul trouble and decision making. And so if he can be good at those two things, at limiting fouls and being a good decision maker with the ball, then that could be an interesting player. And it could also be interesting because if he can shoot the ball, then you could play him alongside Sabonis if you're going up against a team, a matchup where you need two bigs out there. And that could be interesting. And that could almost be a way to counter the Kings' wing depth problem, is by having those two bigs out there at the same time. So for me, out of these three guys, Orlando Robinson is the one that is the most exciting to me. I think before Summer League, I was really excited about Colby Jones and really high on him, but he just hasn't really shown the development that I wanted. And also, I was talking about it's about his 3-point shot, but I also don't think he was that great in his all-around game in Summer League as well, and wasn't a dominant player in other ways. And so that also worried me. But the good part is the Kings don't need these guys to make a jump. Like I feel like the Kings needed Keon Ellis to make a jump to be a rotational player. They either needed Keon Ellis or Chris Duarte or someone. And Keon Ellis was that guy. I think the Kings have enough depth right now where they'll be okay. And so anyone else who makes a jump and shows that they can be a rotational player is just kind of a bonus, at least until there are injuries, and then maybe we will need them to play. But honestly, I am a little higher on some of our two-way guys like Mason Jones and Isaiah Crawford to really be players that can contribute both right away and in the future. And so those will be guys that I am talking about in the next episode. I'll be talking about all three of our two-way guys, plus some of the camp guys like Boogie Ellis and Terry Taylor. So that is it for this episode of the Roll Report. Let me know which guy you are highest on to be able to maybe make an actual impact in the Kings rotation. And I will see you guys next time. Peace.